Hi everybody, it is great to have you with us on another one of our informational webinars. We are sitting today with Aubrey Masango, who is most importantly a parent, but also a broadcaster and a media practitioner and a thought leader. We've got a couple of ideas to discuss with him, and we hope that you're going to find this informational, educational, and inspirational. So Aubrey, thank you for your time today.
Thank you
we know
very
how
much
busy
for
you are.
inviting me, Natalie. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you.
And let's go straight into it. We are talking about schooling. We do see a bit of a crisis happening around us. And just for to get started, tell us your thinking, the public school curriculum, and talking to the needs of industry. How close do you feel that gap is closing?
Yeah. I think maybe just a step back before we really get into the nub of your question. I like to ask myself the question, what is our education supposed to produce? Who is supposed to be the person we call educated? What are their characteristics? What should they be able to do? And I understand that with all of the great intentions that our public education system enters the world with, I think that we tend to be trapped in a bygone understanding, a bygone era of the understanding of what education is supposed to produce. We are still very much fixated on assessments. We want to, and there's nothing wrong with assessments, by the way.
Right.
But
they have to be there.
Absolutely. We need to assess the progress of our children, our students, based on certain set assessments, right? But education cannot be just about the passing of tests. It must be about the ability to implement what has been taught. And what has been taught has got to be relevant to the needs of the community that schooling system, that education system serves. So I tend to get the sense that the education system lives alone. It isn't connected to the community that it's supposed to serve. It's almost, for me, as if it is an education system that's designed for one set of problems that are completely divorced to the problems that we are experiencing in various communities. So for me, what's important is that the education system must reflect what is needed in society, both at a commercial level, at a social level, and perhaps also at an economical level. And I find that there's a very, very big gap between what informs the curriculum and what is needed by society.
So I hear you saying maybe that there needs to be better communication, not only interdepartmental and departmental, governmental with the schools, but also the schools in terms of their broader community, corporates and industry. And maybe that is an opportunity for corporates to have some kind of conversation with people like yourselves, but also with their schooling, maybe to take on a partner school and say what the needs are. And for the education to meet both the needs of the corporate as well as whatever the assessment bases are. Because it's going to be quite difficult to change the actual assessments just because of what we're dealing with here. But I think what I hear you saying is perhaps that is where you have an affinity for the Cambridge way of thinking, in terms of it's based around critical thinking. It's not based on the assessment at the end of the day, even though, as you say, we have to have assessments.
Sure.
So leading to that, why do you think kids are so obsessed with the assessments? And what could be another alternative? We have to have assessments, progress has to be monitored. But what else, aside from the Cambridge critical thinking methods, how can we address that?
I think that, and you point to the fact that that's why I have such a strong affinity for the Cambridge method and the Cambridge curriculum as a whole. I think that the centricity, the focus of any education system, any curriculum, should be to create people that solve problems. And in order for us to solve problems, we've got to have the critical thinking ability that problem solving demands. And what happens currently in the general, and it's not just a South African situation, by the way, it's something that happens all over the world. But with the focus and the fixation on assessments and the fixation on credentials, I have a BA in whatever, or I have an MBA in whatever. The critical question is never asked. What can you do with that? What problem can you solve with that? Otherwise, what we have is a situation where people have beautiful credentials, but they mean nothing to their economy, to their communities, in terms of the ability to solve the problems of those communities. Remember, Natalie, ultimately, an educated person must be the person that can solve problems. You are educated because you can think critically, you can be able to assess and articulate critically, analytically, what a problem is, and therefore be able to develop solutions for that problem. What I find is that we've got a lot of people with credentials, and we call them qualifications, by the way, in this country, but all they are
Yes.
credentials.
Yeah.
A qualification should speak to competence, not a title. Right. What can you do should be the question that we ask. And I think that what we've done with our education system, not only here in South Africa, but throughout Africa, is that we've created people with gowns, certificates, but people that can't apply what they've learned. And so part of why I like the Cambridge sort of approach, I think the word that you educationists use is pedagogy or pedagogics,
Yes.
is the approach to education with the mind to solving problems by creating people who think critically, who ask questions, who are curious about things.
So I like that approach that you, and I think that's part of this, the whole fourth IR
Yep.
that we're looking at, that whether, no matter what level of schooling, whether it's primary, high, or up into higher education and beyond, is that we need to create people who can take the matter at hand. And I think we've also seen it through COVID.
Yep.
We had to do all kinds of lateral moves, and it wasn't just no longer on the ladder, but rungs were missing in the ladder, and we had to find a way around it. And I think that that's what the critical thinking is going to give you.
Yeah.
It's the application. It's application based.
Just to jump onto what you're saying now,
Yeah.
I was just driving from home, coming to this meeting, to this interview, and I saw a young person with a placard saying, "I have a BSc in something really, I would imagine that's scarce, right?
Yes.
I have a BSc in this particular field, and I'm unemployed. Could you please help me?" On the streets of Johannesburg. So I ask myself this question. Here's a young person who has done everything we've told them to do. Go through the primary education system. Go through the secondary education system. Go to university, get a degree, and we'll get you a job. There he is standing with a placard. Probably one of the most humiliating things a graduate can go through. And it speaks to the crisis that we're facing at the moment. That there is no communication between industry and academia.
Right.
And that connection between what industry requires and what academia is trying to teach our young people is completely disconnected. And that's what I refer to as the crisis of credentialism.
Yes.
We are not looking for competence, we're looking for credentials. And that's the big problem. And I think that that's what the Cambridge sort of approach is trying to circumvent. It's trying to say we need to get people who are going to create work by being able to identify what the problems are and also suggest what the solutions of those problems are. And that's what we critically need in this country, in all fields. You know, whether it's the commercial field, the scientific field, the legal field, the political field, We need people that are going to think critically and then be able to think in a solutions-orientated way of thinking. And I worry that we're not educating, we're schooling.
Right.
I don't know if that makes any sense.
I think it does. Makes sad sense.
Yeah.
But I think what we're here to do is to start the conversation and hopefully generate some kind of outcomes that can differ and that we can make a difference.
Sure.
On that, I want to ask your opinion. In terms of the Cambridge education, which has a different approach and methodology, what do you think of becoming basically, even at a high school level, a global citizen?
I've been thinking about that a lot, Natalie. I've got 3 kids. I've got 2 prepubescent children, one 5, one 9, and my oldest is 16 years old. One of the things that I constantly worry about, and really it worries me, okay, is are my children being prepared to be global citizens? Right? We are South Africans, we're black South Africans, and we're proud of that. But we've got to create children who understand that they are part of a bigger identity than just their South Africanness, just their blackness, just their gender. They've got to think of themselves as being contributors in a global sense. I keep saying to them, you've got to understand yourselves as little energies. And I'm hoping that we can create more, or an educational system or a curriculum that is going to bring them to that consciousness, that is going to make them understand that you've got to be tech savvy. I mean, the COVID situation has really made us understand that if we don't wake up to the fact that we've got to use technology, we've got to be more present online, we've got to be able to connect with people all over the world, so that my children can understand that they are not competing with somebody in the next suburb or in the next township or in the next city, but they're competing with somebody in China, right, somebody in the United States of America, somebody in Kenya, somebody in Nigeria. They need to understand themselves as global citizens. I love the poem by, I can't remember who the author is, but I think it's called Desiderata. It says, you are the child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. Right. I'd like to say to young people that you're a child of the universe, no less than the people in the United States and China and anywhere. Absolutely. And our education system needs to teach our children to see themselves as global citizens. Who's teaching our children about the fact that you have an opportunity right now, even where you sit, to get a job in China, where you sit? Right. We need to start cultivating that kind of thinking instead of understanding yourself only as a Joburger or as a Praetorian or as a Cape Townian.
Or as the gentleman standing on the side of the road with his son.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I like that thinking. Okay, so just to finish off, I just want to get your opinion also on homeschooling. Being that we're slightly older than high school kids, I know myself personally, I have a bit of a reticence to maybe homeschooling and digital and online monitoring and things like that. I just want to get your thoughts, especially being over COVID. We've had to develop bubbles, we've had kids at home, and what is your thinking on kids learning at home with methodology, being that that's actually how they speak to each other, even if they're in the same room, they're talking to each other on their phones.
Yeah.
So what is your thinking of kids learning online?
So I understand and respect the fact that children learn from each other when they're at school. It's that peer sort of cross-pollination of knowledge, of understanding, that when they are together, they learn together and they perhaps learn better in that sense. One of the things that I've discovered as a broadcaster is that the education system where we school our children at schools has taken the responsibility away from parents to also get involved in the education of their children. In that my children over the COVID period, where I've had to be with them and be involved in their education, has helped me connect them to their culture as it pertains to what they're learning. So we will perhaps talk about a particular word in English, and I then get a chance to say, but in your language, that word is this word. So for example, we were talking about perseverance. And we speak so much English that we forget that we are Ndebele. But we started a process where we started to say, but perseverance means this in isiNdebele. Perseverance in isiNdebele is ukukhohlelela, sorry, right? And what that does is that it gives me the opportunity to get into my mind, into my child's rhythm of thinking and learning, so that the learning is not alienated from who he is. And that is a responsibility of us as parents and the home environment. So I'm thinking that the homeschooling opportunity is giving us all an opportunity to reconnect at the level of the curriculum, the academic stuff that needs to be learned, but as to how that academic stuff relates to you as an individual, your cultural background, and perhaps your all of the things that make you you. The Fees Must Fall movement in South Africa raised some very, very important things. One of which is that the education system feels far from us. We learn things and we cram stuff, we memorize things, but we don't internalize things because we're not there. And what the homeschooling situation is doing is that it's beginning to integrate what we learn academically with who we are socially and culturally. And I think that that opportunity is being created by this homeschooling situation, where we are now beginning to look at what our kids are learning and are saying, but do you understand that means this in your cultural context, in your understanding of who you are? And in that way, I believe, like the Koreans, the Japanese, who learn the same Pythagoras theory that the children in America and in Europe learn, but are able to be innovative. They can invent things because it's happening from their cultural perspective. And so they're not alienated from what they're learning academically, because it's not something that they're learning for somebody else. They're learning it for themselves. And the opportunity to learn from home is giving us the opportunity to connect our children to the content that they're learning, which is academic, to who they are. And that's going to produce the people that are able to articulate our problems and be able to solve them. That's what the homeschooling opportunity is providing us. The Cambridge system that is encouraging critical thinking and questioning and curiosity, that is making children understand that they are not just being schooled, but they are being educated to be able to understand the world in innovative ways, in ways that are unique to them and the realities that are presented to them. That is what is going to give us hope for the future. But if we keep doing what we've been doing, my generation and your generation has been doing, then we are doomed for failure. One of my biggest and favorite poets is a guy by the name of Khalil Gibran. I know you are familiar to him. Yeah. When he speaks of children, he says, your children are not yours. They are life's longing after itself. And what we need to do is we need to hand our children back to life with, of course, all of the sensitivities and the love that we can. But that means allowing them to think for themselves and not just feed them with our thoughts, but give them information so that they can process it with their realities. That is what's going to give us a future, a hope for the future. And that's what homeschooling is going to provide us with.